Hey guys, did I ever tell you what I think about vampire books? Let me tell you about that. Hey guys, Pat Parker here with 52 Books. Today I have for you a review of a book that I just finished reading, and that is Stormfront by Jim Butcher. Okay, so just the facts, straight facts, ma'am. Stormfront by Jim Butcher is published in year 2000. It is 372 pages, 27 chapters, book one of a 17-part Dresden Files series. It is urban fantasy, which means it is sort of a mashup between detective noir and Harry Potter. So it's sort of a detective book that features magic and supernatural type creatures. Here is a couple of good blurbs from the cover. Harry Dresden's investigation of a grisly double murder pulls him into the darkest depths of magical Chicago. Where there is black magic, there is a black mage, and now that mage has Harry's name. Okay, with regards to the vampire thing that I mentioned earlier, in my opinion, the vampire genre of fantasy novels sort of peaked in the late 1980s or early 1990s with the publication of Anne Rice's Interview with a Vampire. After Dracula was published a million years ago and Interview with the Vampire was published, with very few exceptions, the genre just went straight down the toilet. Now, Buffy the Vampire Slayer was not altogether terrible, and a actually very good one, perhaps one of my favorite three, or I shouldn't say favorite, one of the only three vampire stories that I can tolerate is Shadow of the Vampire. That's a great one. But with the exception of that handful of stories, the vampire genre has gone down the tubes, and to the point that I have sworn that I would never read another vampire book. But Jim Butcher snuck one in on me. So I was reading through this Harry Dresden book, which I went into expecting magical noir, and it's mostly that, but along comes this vampire, and sure enough, this vampire is closer to the old school, actually scary vampires, the dark, twisted, murderous, ravenous vampires, more similar to Dracula, more similar to Interview with the Vampire, more similar to Shadow of the Vampire. So Jim Butcher's treatment of vampires, while it has not won me over to the Vampire Lovers Club, it was pretty good. So I read this book and I got curious about the subgenre of urban fantasy, which I have not read a whole bunch of. It includes a few very old stories, but it includes Harry Potter. Some people consider Harry Potter a urban fantasy, and Dresden Files, and I came across Laurel K. Hamilton. She was apparently foundational in the genre, the subgenre of urban fantasy, but everything that she's written looks like another vampire romance thing, so it's not anything that I'll ever be reading. But who this book, this first Dresden File book, most reminds me of, if you've ever read F. Paul Wilson's Repairman Jack books, this is quite similar. And I personally love Repairman Jack. It is, I haven't seen it mentioned as an urban fantasy very often, but it certainly is, because it's about this off-the-grid sort of guy who fixes things, fixes situations for people when the situation is like right on the edge, maybe stepping off the edge of legal, right? So he fixes these situations for people, but he keeps stumbling upon these supernatural happenings or these supernatural creatures. So in the midst of his repair work, he encounters this magic or this ancient enemy. I would highly recommend reading Repairman Jack if you liked Harry Dresden. Anyway, back to Stormfront. In summary, I loved it. It was a quick read. It was it's great, quick escape fantasy. He did not go overboard with the supernatural romance, which maybe to be published, you have to include some of that crapola in anything that you write. But if there's much of it, or if it's very overt, then you're going to lose me about the time I see the cover. It's a good choice for a palate cleanser between longer, more serious books that make you think hard. This book doesn't make you think hard, but it is super well written, so it really doesn't count as pulp or escapist trash, that sort of thing. Definitely recommended. Would read it again someday. Will definitely continue the series, but not immediately. So that's what I have to say about Harry Dresden, The Dresden Files, Book 1, Stormfront.